Helen Keller, 1880–1968, was an American author, political activist and lecturer. At 19 months old, Keller contracted an unknown illness described by doctors as scarlet fever or meningitis. The illness left her both deaf and blind. Living in Tuscumbia, Alabama, by the age of 7 Keller had already developed more than 60 home signs that she could use with her family. She also learned how to tell which person was walking into a room from the vibrations of their footsteps. Despite being blind and deaf, her family were determined she have the same opportunities as everyone else. So, Helen's mother began to search for help. She contacted Alexander Graham Bell, who was working with deaf children. Mr. Bell referred Mrs. Keller to the Perkins School for the Blind in Massachusetts. The school's director Michael Anagnos asked 20-year-old former student Anne Sullivan, herself visually impaired, to become Keller's instructor. It was the beginning of a 49-year-long relationship, where Sullivan grew from governess to companion. It was 1887 by the time Sullivan and Keller first met at the girls' house, and teaching began with showing Keller to communicate by spelling words into her hand. At first it was difficult because Keller didn't realize that every object had a word uniquely identifying it. A breakthrough moment came when Keller realized the motion Sullivan made on her one palm, while cool water ran over her other palm, symbolized the idea of water. She quickly demanded to know the names of all the other familiar objects in her world. From that point on, Keller flourished in her education. Because of Anne Sullivan's patience, persistence, and high expectations, Helen learned to speak. In 1904, at the age of 24, Keller was the first deafblind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree, and throughout her education she had learned to speak, leading her to give speeches and lectures on aspects of her life. Keller also learned to hear other people's speeches, by reading their lips with her hands. She also became proficient at using Braille and reading sign language with her hands. In the years and decades following, Keller continued to make her voice heard through various books and the talks she held. Helen wrote an autobiography, The Story of My Life, 1902, with the help of John Albert Macy, her editor. She wrote 14 books and many articles during her life. In total she traveled to over 40 countries, mostly accompanied by her lifelong companion Sullivan, who had remained a huge part of Keller. Keller devoted much of her later life to raising funds for the American Foundation for the Blind, but after suffering a series of strokes in 1961 had to spend her remaining years at home. In 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson awarded Keller the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the United States' two highest civilian honors. The following year she was elected to the National Women's Hall of Fame in the New York World's Fair. Keller died in her sleep on June 1, 1968 at her home Archon Ridge in Connecticut. Keller's lasting impact can be felt in the legacy of works she published, the speeches she made, and the organizations she founded. Keller was a role model and proved to the world that deaf people are able to communicate just like everyone else, and showed people they are just as capable given the right tools to do so. Conclusion: failure occurs every day, in school, jobs, housework, and within families. It is unavoidable, irritating, and causes pessimism. Draw inspiration from these stories the next time you experience failure, no matter the scale. In the moment, some failure might seem like the end of the road, but remember, there are countless successful men and women in the world today who are only enjoying success because they decided to push past the inevitable bleakness of failure. Learn from your mistakes, reflect and accept the failure, but revisit your passion and keep pursuing your goals no matter what.